All right, well, by my watch, it's 1:03 p.m. I'm calling the February 6, 2023 meeting of the Albemarle County Architecture Review Board to order. Carolyn, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Stoner,
Here.
Mr. Hancock,
Here.
Mr. Mansuno,
Here.
Mr. Henningsen,
Here.
Mr. Vanderwerf.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Today's meeting is a hybrid meeting. The public may access and participate in the meeting electronically. Instructions for doing so are posted on the Albemarle County website at the Albemarle County calendar. The public has real-time audiovisual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone. Both is provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. This meeting is a public record and subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. All speakers, when it is your turn to speak, please first state your name for the record. Applicants who are making presentations, note that your presentation is limited to a total of 15 minutes, which you can divide among your team members. Carolyn will let us know when the 15 minutes are up. If applicants in the meeting room have team members attending virtually who will need to present, please make that known when you come to the podium. Everyone who is participating virtually, please mute your microphone until it is your turn to speak. Do any ARB members have anything to disclose?
Yes, I have something to disclose. The firm that I'm employed by is presenting under other business for Southwood Apartments A.
All right, thank you. Carolyn, are there any members of the public that want to make a comment about a project that is not on the agenda for review?
No, sir, not at this time.
All right, thanks a lot. We'll move to the consent agenda. There is one consent agenda item today, which is ARB-2022-111, Gold Eagle Pool and Health Club. Do any ARB members want to move the Gold Eagle application off the consent agenda?
No.
All right, thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Thanks.
I'll second the motion.
All right, thank you. Caroline, could we put that to a vote?
Sure. Mr. Henningsen,
Aye.
Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Matsuno,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We do not have any regular review items today, so we'll move right into our work session. There's one work session today. It is on the entrance corridor design guidelines addenda. Mariah, do you have a presentation ready? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your time today. Let's get rolling. Okay, great. So today we're going to be reviewing the draft entrance corridor addenda for the northern section of Route 20, which goes from Prophet Road at the north to the intersection of Route 250 east. This corridor we laid out as to incorporate the whole of Route 20 in the county, which is has a total length of 22.3 miles. 4.9 is in the northern portion, and the remaining 17.4 is in the southern portion. So today we'll be looking at the northern portion again, which has been divided into two segments. Stony Point Rural, and Ravenna Neighborhood. This sheet provides the history of the full context of the corridor, and then the next sheet with the general characteristics and zoning is really at this time only focused on the northern portion, and we'll add the southern portion in as that is surveyed and we have the information at that point. So on to the first segment. The northernmost segment is 4 miles in length and primarily rural. The road is fairly narrow, alternating in heavily wooded borders and open views of rolling lawns and local topography. The developments along the segment are primarily residential, with older residences set back a ways from the road, while newer buildings have narrower setbacks. This is the precedent image sheet for the segment. And then the southern segment we're calling Ravenna Ravenna Neighborhood, and that begins at the Durrier Drive and Cassian Farm Road intersection, which is where we identified not only the transition between segments, but it also is the transition between the rural area at the north and the development area at the south as you enter the Pantops development area. So we thought it was a natural breaking point. Along the travelway, the Cascadia development signals the beginning of the development area. And as development continues to become more dense and uses become more frequent and varied in the area as the road approaches the 250 East corridor and central spine, if you will, of Pantops. And then this is the precedent sheet. We've noted a couple areas where we'd like to get our own shots as it continues to develop out. And that's essentially what we have for the northern portion of the Route 20 corridor. Is there any sheet that you'd like to go back to in the discussion? We could start with a corridor, maybe.
Okay, yeah. All right, I guess I'll just go through and ask individual members if they have questions or comments. Frank Stoner.
I don't have any questions.
Thanks. Tara?
Well, I think this looks great. Thank you for continuing this effort. I guess the only question I had was towards the end when you were calling out the 2 projects that you wanted to get updated photographs for, just what you were hoping to capture in those images.
So in the one at the top right, what I'm hoping to capture is that right now it looks like a Google Street View has more of a construction site going on. So what we'd like to capture is maybe a full bloom kind of spring where you can see the trees and the interaction of the outdoor space, maybe with people in it. And the building, because that is a mixed use building. So we'd like to kind of capture that mix of uses. And then in the middle picture, what we'd like to do is get that's again during construction, and maybe be able to get something that's a little further back and capturing not only this is a 5-story building, but it's sitting next to other storied buildings. So kind of capturing that variation.
Cool, sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Frank Hancock.
Sure. I think this looks great. Just to kind of follow up on the Riverside Village, I think that building is really important and a really great example of a contemporary building that kind of incorporates some vernacular architectural elements. And I think also the site design is really nice, how it's pushed up to the road, and then how there's breaks in the building too that have some kind of smaller people places like gardens, and like, so the building is a little more porous. But I don't know if any one building gets more than one picture, but this one might deserve a couple pictures. And then beyond, it's a really nice development kind of back behind it as well. So good to highlight the successful, and that came before this board, I believe. So nice work. Thank you.
Thanks. Dave?
I agree with my colleagues, appreciate the work. It's another nice development of the study. The break into rural and neighborhood makes sense to me based on the existing pattern of development. I guess one question I had is there underlying zoning that supports that break continuing or is there in current zoning a natural location further north where that might the neighborhood model might extend?
So this is an image of the zoning in the area, and this is essentially the route of 250.
Yeah.
So we have Dardentown on one side and the neighborhood model on the
Yeah.
other, and so that break is right here. To
Where it
your-
goes to the rural.
Yes, so it's zoned rural on both sides, but it looks like this is already built out as a residential, but I think there's a church on this parcel here, and then I cannot recall what this parcel is. Maybe it could extend.
Well, that's, no, I'm glad to see that the zoning is aligned with where we're seeing the pattern of development too. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, thanks. I don't have any additional comments or questions. Another great, great piece and thing with the previous ones that we've seen, so. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
This is a really nice map. Did you just make it for this presentation?
It's a screenshot, actually.
Just curious if there's anything in the like this addendum that would highlight zoning. I guess you list it, but you don't have a graphic or anything. Is that right?
Right, we haven't included those maps. We have included narrative descriptions in the corridor sheets themselves under zoning and land use, and that's how we've kind of combined them together. We could explore that.
I don't want to add any work. I think it's in there. This is very legible and nice. So. Thank you.
Mariah, to Dave's question about the potential of a change in zoning or a comp plan amendment that might include areas north of the existing zone property. Has there been any conversation at the county level about that?
Not yet. The comp plan is exploring different strategies in that area just to mitigate the rising density that's expected, but they're in phase 2 right now and nothing has been concrete. They're all mainly just, I guess, looking at different strategies, but nothing has been decided or come before the board or work sessions or public input at this point.
All right, well, there are no more questions or comments. Thanks a lot.
Great.
All right, so we'll move to other business. The first other business item is Southwood Apartment A discussion. I don't know how it works. How does that work? Does Tara have, he doesn't have to like leave the room or. Oh, right.
Can't vote.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
try not to influence the other board members in an appropriate way.
No physical.
Hi. Hello, thanks. My name is Whitney McDermott. I'm with BRW Architects. Thanks for taking the time to put me on the agenda and this project on the agenda today. I do have 4 slides which could be helpful, if you all agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Actually.
I don't think I.
Rolled it up to the top screen. You did everything right.
Okay,
There you go.
thank you. let's see, I'll go to full screen mode. Again, I'm Whitney McDermott with BRW Architects. Thanks for adding this project to the agenda, Hickory Hope Apartments A. I'm here today because we just submitted for our Architectural Review Board application today, slated a March 20th official ARB review of the project. But I wanted to come before you all today. We wanted to, on behalf of our firm and Piedmont Housing Alliance, who's developing the project, to just introduce it and give a brief history of the project. And in light of the context also of the entrance corridor and the guidelines, just hoping to set up for maybe what could be a discussion about if there's any opportunity to not necessarily just to make a smooth ARB process. And so this slide here is showing the context of the projects. It's at Southwood. It's in the first phase of Southwood, right at the intersection of Hickory Street and Old Lynchburg Road. The project that we are here today are the two buildings with the red square around it. They're the Hickory Hope Apartments A. Like I said, it's being developed by Piedmont Housing Alliance. They are also developing the building across the street, which is also affordable housing. This is an affordable housing multifamily project. And the Hickory Hope Apartments A is two buildings in which there are 71, 2 and 3 bedroom, all affordable rental units. 100% of the units are designed to accessibility standards for meeting universal design. There are elevators in the building. It also has community space within the building along fronting on Hickory Street and fronting on what's also shown here, a community park. And that community space is open to all of Southwood. It is also slated to host a MACA Head Start Early Childhood Development Center, all kind of right there at that nexus in the corner, what is kind of the highest density hub of the proposed Southwood Phase 1 development. That's a context for the project. And I also wanted to give a little more context from kind of the timeline side, setting up for the discussion, which I have on the next slide. So this is part of Southwood Phase 1, which was rezoned in 2019 from my records. And part of that rezoning, there was an architectural review board internal to the Southwood community that was required as part of that NMD. And so we went before that Southwood internal ARB in February of 2021 and got approval for the project. And then proceeded to go through all the processes. I failed to mention this is a LIHTC project, low income housing tax credits. That's the funding source. That's what makes it the affordability side of this possible. And those were awarded in June of 2021. We then jumped into just designing and developing the buildings, having gotten our internal review, and the site plan was just approved the end of January. And so we have jumped into the building permit process because of the LIHTC funding, putting some constraints on overall timeline. We really need to start construction on site to secure that funding in May of this year. We're working with the county and community development to make that building process as smooth as possible. And we recently became aware of the fact that the entrance corridor guidelines had been applied or reapplied to Old Lynchburg Road. And so that's kind of what's in green above this, as during the bulk of our ARB Southwood process, I believe that Old Lynchburg Road did not have arterial status. And so we were not aware of the entrance corridor guidelines at that point. And so having just received word when we dove into the building permit process that we are in fact in the entrance corridor and that therefore have to go through the ARB process. That's kind of why I'm here, just to talk about that late breaking news and what we might be able to do, what we can provide for you all to help the process go more smoothly, so that we can hopefully continue to hit these really critical deadlines for the funding. And so that's what I've tried to capture here in these 4 points. So the Southwood NMD was established during the time when the internal ARB, or sorry, with an internal ARB prior to the time, or during that period of time when the entrance corridor didn't have guidelines applied to Old Lynchburg Road. Same with when we went before the internal ARB. And so there's a question there about how do we approach the 2 board reviews? I wouldn't want to diminish the Southwood ARB's ruling. Obviously, the county has a vision there as well. So how to reconcile those, and then also how do we continue to meet the deadlines associated with county approvals and permits pending this process of the ARB? It's my understanding that we have to have ARB approvals prior to the building permit going through the entire approvals process. I think we're already working with community development to see if we can't have simultaneous review. But those are kind of the questions I wanted to present to the board today. So that's what I have. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for that
Yeah.
presentation. I guess if any members have any thoughts about these questions, maybe we could try and just offer some guidance for now and.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess as far as the 2 board reviews, I guess my impression is that like the 2 boards have kind of different purviews as far as what requirements they're trying to apply, or at least what constituency they have in terms of like what the review is supposed to
Mhm.
ensure. So I think, at least my personal opinion is that as a county board member, I'd certainly take into consideration what
Yeah.
the Southwood board thought about it, if that information is offered as part of the submittal. But I think it's still have our own guidelines that we need to apply. So, you know, if anything that I felt, you know, was not in conformance with the guidelines that we have to operate under, I would still probably feel that I'd have to make a comment, but I think in consideration of your position having to satisfy 2 boards that possibly could have conflicting comments, I think we would, or at least I personally would certainly take that into account
Mhm.
and try not to twist things up too much for you.
Thank you.
Quick jump in. If you could speak into the mic. I was told
Sorry.
couldn't hear too well on the virtual
I got it.
component.
Yes, does anyone have any further comment about that question, number 3, about the 2 board review aspect of it?
Yeah, I think I appreciate your comments, and I think that's a good point. I think it'd be helpful if there are conflicting, you know, the Southwood ARB is conflicting with our entrance corridor guidelines, maybe we bring that to the forefront, and
Okay.
that's one of the things we focus on. Do you know of anything, you know, as you come before us today that is in conflict with our guidelines?
I wouldn't say necessarily in conflict. It's more of maybe where to front the building. I think the community likes fronting on that park, which I know isn't necessarily adjacent to the entrance corridor. So just being aware of that, I think, is a big component of the design.
Mm-hmm. And then I would say, you know, maybe we look at the site plan, and you
Mhm.
could talk about what you're thinking for the architecture materials, just preliminarily, that would help us just from an education standpoint. So when it comes before us again, we have some of that background.
Definitely.
Full disclosure, I probably should not participate in this discussion because I serve on the board of PHA. Having said that, I would wonder whether it's possible for this project to be grandfathered, given that site plan approval was granted prior to the implementation of the new corridor guidelines. I mean, it feels like this is a bit of an unfair situation to put them in at this late date. But that's more of a sort of a process technical question.
Right.
At what,
I would let Margaret jump in because she's spoken with our accounting attorney, and that's how we ended up in this kind of position right now.
Sure. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, we have checked all through this with the county attorney's office, and the site plan does not require ARB approval, but the building permit does, and so that is the work that we need to get through. We had encouraged the applicant to get that ARB application in as soon as possible, so we could get the review started and keep things on schedule as much as possible.
Thank you, Margaret. No, I appreciate you bringing it before us ahead of the formal review, and agree with my colleagues that I think it will be reasonable and helpful for you to present the circumstances that you have here and maybe a little more detail about the boards and the reviews, and also about the site plan approval. I guess two primary criteria that I guess the current design doesn't comply with are relegated parking and orientation to the EC. Are there others that you think are significant ones in the current design?
Those are the two that jumped out to me as I was writing the narrative for the
Okay.
project, and I tried to address them from our own perspective, but of
Certainly.
course,
Well, I think maybe perhaps as part of the application and the presentation and forthcoming, any elements of the design that either exist or can be introduced to mitigate those impacts or those non-conformances with those criteria may be helpful also to help us find a pathway to approval, or at least for myself.
thank you.
So for example, I think the site plan currently shows a very wide vegetated area in front of the parking. So that I think could be a mitigating factor. In terms of precedents, I don't recall clearly the development of the Red Roof Inn property, but I seem to recall that we may have at that location, because of the site geometry, also allowed a little bit of deviation from the strict frontality or perpendicular orientation. So again, if you could maybe bring a couple precedents of other extenuating circumstances, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great point, and I have some prior knowledge of this project as well. I worked on it in my previous employer, but my recollection is there's some grade change between the parking lot and the road that perhaps screens the parking.
Mhm,
I think the parking is set down below
Yes.
perhaps.
mhm.
So anyway, you could highlight that, and I think that'll minimize the impact that the parking, that parking being fronted on the corridor
Right.
will have, so.
The neighborhood model also requires relegated parking from the neighborhood, and so that's another place where there's overlap of the two jurisdictions, yeah.
All right, thanks. And then as far as the funding deadline, that's kind of another procedural kind of
Right.
technical question that I'm not sure how that would go. I think we have had applications where we have viewed it once and then thought that it was close enough on first pass to let staff follow up without without another hearing, so that's a possibility. But beyond that, I'm sure staff can help you hopefully move this through
Okay,
within the time frame that you need it to go.
thank you.
One more procedural question, I guess. Since the site plan was approved prior to the entrance corridor guidelines, is it possible to limit our review to the buildings themselves and not the site?
It's a good question, Frank.
That is the intention,
That's Margaret to jump in as well,
Margaret?
I believe.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
That is the intention, that the site plan does not require ARB review, so none of the site layout will be available for you to review or comment on. It's just limited to the architecture of the buildings.
Okay.
Strike my previous comment about the parking.
You can strike mine as well.
Interesting, okay.
That's helpful. I mean, and in some ways, this could be the preliminary review or a lot of times we'll see architecture very early, sometimes with a site plan. So I think this would satisfy that. Maybe if we spend a little bit of time talking about it, even if it's conceptual of, I think you had some images in your presentation.
I do. I have one. I could have been more prepared. We have plenty. We did just submit the application today. So we have a whole presentation on submitted to the county, but there is a small render at the top of this page and the building on the left, and this is the approach from Old Lynchburg Road down Hickory. And so it's not necessarily the best vantage for understanding the building and its relationship to the street and that corner park. But it does turn, I guess if we go back to the site plan or the plan, it does turn around this corner park, like I said, with kind of the main entry points of the building in this area. There's a plaza there and entrances into the two different lobbies of the building under an open air building connector with landscaping to kind of define that park. And that is really kind of the main interaction between the building and pedestrians and the main entrance sequence to the building. And so what you're seeing here is more the overall understanding of the building. Like I said, 70 units split between two buildings. And so that means there's 31 units in this one building along Hickory. And the short side is what you're seeing that would face Old Lynchburg Road, and the longer side here, basically it's a bay system on the at the undulating with kind of like the rhythm of the units within. There's brick. Over 80% of the building has to be brick per funding. And so we've hit that. This whole, there's two color schemes of brick. There's a kind of a whitewashed one and a lighter brick. And then there is some fiber cement panels just on occasion at the top of the bays with the brick panels running between. The neighborhood of Southwood wanted to, break down the scale as much as possible for such a large building. And so what we tried to do was to find something that was somewhat simple to hit also the funding requirements of cost constraints, but also to try to make it feel like more of a downtown. That was the vision for this area from the residents of Southwood. This is downtown Southwood. We're not in a downtown, but of this area, how can we make it feel a little more urban, but also feel a little bit like a residential downtown area, townhomes perhaps. And that's kind of what the rhythm of those bays are. That's a quick overview without much to look at, but that's that. And the windows are, I think they're going to be Pella's according to the contractor, and they have a fossil color. So it's a little bit like a gray, which is similar to the mortar color, all in the ARB application that we just submitted today. Also, samples are over in community development as well.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And just so the buildings on the other side of the street, that's all approved.
That's
Is
building.
that under construction?
That's building apartments B, Hickory
Did you
Hope
already
as
say? Sorry.
well. They're Piedmont Housing Alliance. We were told they are not in the entrance corridor
Okay,
purview.
are there any entrances like to the units
There are-
along this drive, or is everything in that back corner?
Just to the building itself, there are entrances in that first corner. Let me go back to the site plan. There are entrances in this area. There are several, many onto the green itself, some from Hickory down here though, and some from the parking lot side. There are egress from stairs back here, and over here. But there aren't any direct access between, the units in the street themselves. Those all go to corridors within the building. So no, there aren't any doors at this area of the building. But there are windows, which we feel are an appropriate kind of interaction for an apartment building in a street.
You said the lighter was like a white,
The white is it's like a whitewashed looking brick. It's called Dover White. It's by Triangle Brick out of South Carolina.
and the beige is that,
It's called Charleston. It's more of like a pinkish red.
oh, that's also a brick.
It's also a brick. Mhm. There's only a bit of fiber cement and that's here, and then on this front hickory facade, kind of connecting the buildings in that recessed brick panel, there's a different color of hardy panel or fiber cement panel. One is just Arctic white up here, and then this is called khaki brown, and it basically is very similar in tone to the brick and the mortar in the windows.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There any other
I don't have any further
comments or
comments.
questions?
Okay. Great.
All right,
Well, thank you all again
Thanks a
for
lot.
your time. We'll plan to come with that information to our meeting and hope for the best from our end. Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to approval of the January 3rd minutes. Would anybody like to make a motion for approval?
Like to make a motion, excuse me. Like to make a motion to approve the minutes of January 3rd, 2023.
I'll second.
All right, Carolyn, can we put it to a vote?
Yeah. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Matsuno,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf,
Aye.
Mr. Hemmingson.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Are there any other items that any board member would like to bring up? All right.
I have a quick item to bring up.
Yeah.
Second, let's see.
And sorry, all this is me
Yeah,
taking some of
this
your
is,
time.
brought up by Dade. The visibility of mechanical equipment on recently approved ARB projects, Fifth Street and 2415 and 2415 Ivy Roads, now known as Bel Air Place. Here goes the aerial shot of the visibility level or the viewpoint from Fifth Street into Fifth Street Commercial. You can see the bottom right-hand corner's street view from July of 2019. You can see the vegetations on those trees, so the visibility is the rooftop of the buildings hadn't been completely finished, but the rooftop is kind of obscured in that view. And then the aerial again, top left corner, and then you can see the bottom left and right are the photos from February of this year that show kind of photo and then zoomed in photo of the rooftop equipment. Staff and they believe this visibility is minimal, but we wanted to get your thoughts on this level of visibility and what staff should do on this kind of already approved project. It's even with ARB approval, that we always have the stipulation that the caveat that mechanical equipment shall not be visible from the entrance corridor in the approvals that we send out. You want to
I
see?
think I have to recuse on this one because I think my firm did that.
Okay. Just also highlights the point of visibility can be seen sometimes further out of where staff and the board have been considered from a certain aspect on the entrance corridor.
I have a question. Did you go back and look at the application? Was there screening in place that was never, or screening design that was never?
The parapet wall, it was reviewed with the parapet wall, but I guess this viewpoint or vantage point, because this was reviewed before my time, wasn't considered. So I think if it was, the parapet wall would have been likely increased to counteract that visibility.
And Chris, I appreciate your looking into it and getting these shots. I think that it's visible even when you make it past the tree cover. There's a stainless steel vent hood and some other things. So just, because that note is so explicit and the requirement is so explicit, I agree it's a minimal level of visibility, but wanted to ask her other thoughts on whether some
Right.
screening was necessary.
As a reminder, is a zoomed in photos. And
You have any shots, Chris, closer to entrance to the parking lot for that building?
this is probably the closest one I did have through the entrance. The entrances. As you weren't viewing the screen. This one's the closest one I have to the entrance, and it's just right there. I didn't notice, or didn't get a photo of kind of looking straight. I didn't notice the rooftop equipment when I pulled the roof. There's probably likely some visibility of it. It definitely became even more minimal as you get closer to the entrance into the Fifth Street commercial.
Was somebody else driving when you took
Yes.
these photos?
Added caveat, somebody else was, I was driving. My wife actually took these photos.
Okay, great. Good to check. Well, I guess so is the question sort of like, is there sort of like looking forward as we do our reviews, considering the views and perspectives?
Further away than the staff always has to consider. There's perspective views from further away than just right on the development and kind of looking in that visibly might be higher, increased, or need to be considered further away from along the entrance corridor from the development.
And just verifying really where you are in the topography from the corridor.
Correct. There's a change in elevation as it goes down on Fifth Street.
There any, were you all hoping for like talking about is there any remedy or going forward, or?
I think the thought was just getting kind of either a confirmation that agreed with kind of staff and Gates viewpoint of the level of visibility, or if any action needed to be taken by staff to kind of reach out to this applicant.
So what's the usual process if action were to be taken by staff?
Margaret, could you jump in on this one? I'm not 100% certain.
Sure. What you could probably talk about the other example that you had as well. We would just double check that the drawings are clear, that the equipment was supposed to be completely screened, and then we would contact the property owner, present the issue, and ask them for options for how they would like to resolve the problem.
If
When
they
it
say,
gets- when it gets to this point, it's difficult. I mean, it doesn't happen very often. There have been a few examples in the past where screening was added. Yeah, the property owner would need to work with their architect or engineer, I suppose, to see what options could be pursued.
if the property owner says no, Margaret, what are the enforcement options for the county?
We would get with our code compliance officers and see what the next steps would be. Identifying it as a violation and then moving forward through those steps. We don't do that very often for ARB issues, so I really don't have the details to give you today, but I'm happy to get that information to you.
Thank you,
Might be
Margaret.
helpful to have.
And
Yes.
Chris, oh, go ahead. Yeah,
Before we
Chris,
start telling people to
yeah.
do something.
Chris, would
We
you
don't
mind
really-
sharing the other photo as well?
Have the ability to enforce it.
And then the other location's 2415 Ivy Road, also known as, or now known as Bel Air Place. This one was an instance of a rooftop mechanical equipment unit being identified as to be removed on the plans. And as you can see in the photos, just that front one that was existing, it wasn't removed. They placed screening in front of it, but the screening doesn't go all the way back to fully screen it. I've spoke with the applicant and the owner and just this morning, actually, they're gonna add additional screening to fully screen the sides, and I requested a photo once that's done. So hopefully it should be resolved pretty quickly. So this was an instance of we didn't anticipate the visibility. It was just a existing rooftop mechanical equipment on a non-approved ARB building that was labeled to be removed, that wasn't removed ultimately in the final construction of the building or renovation of the building.
That's helpful to hear that you reached out. Did you reach out to the Fifth Street owner?
No, not yet. We wanted to,
I mean, maybe that's just a next step.
Mhm.
I mean, I would think you're not threatening a zoning violation or anything, but this has come to our attention because it's been documented now in our meeting minutes and, we've noticed that mechanical units are visible and it's, a requirement that they be screened. I mean, if you found that an applicant or an owner was willing to add the screening on this one, perhaps that would be the case at the Fifth Street property. But
Yeah,
both of these are new-ish projects. I mean,
and I think when people go through the application process, right, like when you're responding to the comments, you're like, yeah, okay, it is still on the owner to be verifying that also that their equipment won't be visible from the entrance corridor. They've kind of agreed to make it happen. So that seems pretty reasonable.
those are all the items had.
does Dade have an official role that I don't know about on the air? He just gets out more than I do.
I think so. Yeah. The sun was just shining right when I drove.
I don't think the board wants to be in the business of determining at exactly what point we're gonna determine that it's visible and not visible, or it's a little bit visible, we're gonna let that go. Like, this seems like something that at a staff level, some determination should be made. I just want to make sure we're consistent.
Right, yeah.
If we don't in fact have a clear means for enforcement, then I would ask, why are we pursuing it? I
Right,
mean, we could, yeah.
definitely look into that.
Does seem pretty clear cut though, like, that note has to occur on every submission that equipment will not be visible. And I think. See it, then it's visible.
Yeah, I think it is pretty straightforward. We would just go back and double and triple check that the information is on the plans as we think it is. And I think really that the challenge becomes how to add screening that still appears to be coordinated with the building once the building is already in place and completed.
Well, thank you, Chris,
Thank
for
you.
bringing it to the board. And Frank, I appreciate your comments and I agree with the follow-up that if it's visible, it's visible and it makes sense to be clear, but appreciate the follow-up on the matter, Chris. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, are there any other items? All right, the next ARB meeting is scheduled for February 20th, 2023. This will be an in-person meeting. Are there any board members who may not be able to attend?
I will not be here.
I may not be here either. I will let you know by email for sure as soon as I can. Everyone else.
Yeah, I believe it's a school holiday, but I think I'll still be here.
I should be here. I think I'm going.
Frank, you said you may not be.
I will not be here.
I may not be here also.
That's right.
It's,
Yeah,
I really want
it
to
is
do my
a-
duty as vice chair, like that's the one thing.
what would be on the agenda tentatively for that meeting?
We've got, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
We've got one regular review item. It's an initial site plan. So it would be best if we could have a quorum to keep on the schedule for that.
I might be having a baby. So I can't really duck out of that.
That's officially excused.
But if it's,
Need to commit.
yeah,
Can't be, can't be.
but if no one has to recuse, I could potentially be the third quorum member, but it's not really in my control.
And we just need now,
Well,
we just
we-
need it in person.
We need
Quorum.
3 in person, right?
Yeah,
And
I think Tara might have some issues.
Right,
Yeah, I
It's
could
all-
potentially make 3 virtual
Yeah.
if it's like before or after, but I can't promise anything.
and so Frank, I know you're not available. Chris, did you say you're not available?
I am most likely not available.
Not available.
Uh, hmm.
In person.
Do you want to cancel the meeting and just move that item to March 6th?
I guess, let me just confirm for sure, if I can possibly be here and, have a quorum. I'd prefer not to make somebody wait, another 2 weeks. Just
Okay,
scheduling thing, but, I'll let you know for sure, as soon as I can.
okay, thank you.
All right, well, in that case, this meeting is adjourned until the next meeting, possibly on February 20th. By my watch, it's 1:58. And thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Okay.
Thank you very
Chris.
much.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.